parents of 2E kids have had the experience of hearing a teacher say that their child's challenging behavior came out of nowhere. Now at Flex School, we specialize in 2E, so we understand that the challenging behaviors that we see are actually usually a kind of a late indicator of an unmet need, or maybe even a cascading series of unmet needs that to the untrained eye were probably invisible. And if you don't mind, I'll give one quick example because I really want to hear your thoughts on this. And now at Flex School, we know this one example is that discomfort around eating is a biggie at school. So it's super common for our kids. It comes in many forms. If they take medication, their appetite might be suppressed. If they have sensory issues around food, the texture, the temperature is wrong, that can be an issue. Social discomfort, eating in front of people, so many triggers around this. So we have a form for our families to fill out before a child ever comes to our campus. We give them a preview of the day. We give them choices about classes and, the opportunity to share things like strengths, interests, things they want us to know in advance so we can all be set up for success. And if we have a whole section about food. So if lunch is challenging for your child, how can we support them? Should we avoid bringing attention to it and let them skip lunch? Should we offer a less conspicuous space or a snack at a separate time? And we're doing this for two reasons. Like, yes, we want to ease the immediate discomfort around eating. And we're also doing it because we know how rough our kids have it when they don't eat on time. And we understand that the missed lunch is not the end of it. It can be the precursor to those supposedly, seemingly out of nowhere types of behaviors. Our kids become vulnerable when they don't eat and they don't have those reserves. And then that can snowball into an upsetting afternoon. So we try to set them up for success around eating in whichever way will make them comfortable. But we also anticipate that it might not work in a new environment. And if it doesn't work, and if they don't eat very well, they're going to need support later. And so we set that up proactively too. So it doesn't snowball. We don't have necessarily the tears or refusal behaviors or outbursts or shutting down. It doesn't need to get that far. But again, like it's rare for a school to be able to do all of this, right? Like we're spoiled and we can have these kinds of systems because that's our population.
I would say specialized, not spoiled.
So it's not necessarily realistic to expect your child's public school, for example, to have all of this in place or even be aware of all these things. And that's kind of where I'm going with this, because you do talk on these subjects. Do you have advice for parents whose kids are in a school environment that doesn't have this kind of setup? Not even necessarily about lunch, but fill in the blank, like whatever might make your kid become vulnerable, whatever preventable thing might make your kid become more vulnerable during the day. How do we get those needs met earlier so that we can avoid getting to those later indicators of distress, those challenging behaviors?
Yeah, so I recommend 5 questions to ask the end of the year, to ask the quarterback or all teachers, but also a quarterback, the person who gets your kid, if you're lucky enough to have that person. But all teachers can answer these questions and administrators, and they are: what are my kids' strengths? What are my kids' challenges? What accommodation enrichment works? What accommodation enrichment don't work? And what one thing do you want next year's teachers to know? We take that at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year. And by the way, we ask our kiddo to answer those questions and ourselves as parents to answer those questions, usually both parents if there are two parents in the situation. And we give that info. We ask for an in-person meeting. I actually recommend, I'm pretty detailed, Kristin. So I don't recommend the week before school. I don't recommend the first week of school, the second or third week of school, because there's a little bit of a honeymoon period. We have to be respectful of teachers who are like planning their year, and might hear you, but they might only get 10% that actually comes into the school year if you do it beforehand. So I'd say the second or third week of school is your sweet spot. Get a meeting with as many people as you can, explaining that you want to share new information about your child and you want to collaborate. This is when you bake those cookies and you show up and you bring pictures of your kid in Flow and you make a one pager from any former, let's say, neuropsych report or evaluation, a one pager of any IEP or 504 plan you might have, and then the answer to these questions, also a one pager, okay? Because as much as teachers are required to read IEPs, I mean, IEPs are hard to read, man. So I'm just going to call it what it is. Put in the really important information, like what are the 3 goals? What are the action items? Who's in charge? And how are you going to measure success? So that's my approach. Behavior is communication. So we need to help them understand that. I remember speaking with a group of teachers for my own child when he was a freshman, I think, in high school. And I explained, you're going to see a really hard shell, but let me tell you, the marshmallow inside is more marshmallowy than anybody you know, I promise. And I gave some examples. I told them of his strong strengths, passions, and interests so that they maybe, if they played the same instrument or liked the same movie or liked the same books, really books, then there was like a contact point that could happen. And I'll never forget the second week of school, or I guess it must have been 2 weeks after I met with teachers, the teacher I thought was going to be the hardest, really young newbie teacher, he emailed me and said, I am so glad we had that meeting. We had a fire alarm, and I walked back into school with your son. And he said to me, and guys, this is like, my son's in college. So this is like whatever, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Um, they said, when we walked back into school from that fire alarm, I made a point of walking in with your child. So my first reaction was like, yeah, we're taking a time to like talk to my kid. And second, he said, and your kid said to me, I wish I could time travel. So on 9/11, I could pull a fire alarm in the Twin Towers. And he said, I was blown away. Right. But he wouldn't have made that effort. He wouldn't, if I didn't make my advocacy the way that I did, and I wasn't able to share what I know about my kiddo. So I think when we want to try to help teachers see our kid, we have to step out of this formalized way of talking to teachers, and we have to personalize and humanize and recognize how hard this is for us, how hard this is for them, and how hard this is for your child. The parent teacher triangle is so important to keep all those communications happening with everybody.